I'm asking because I feel like that is a gigantic theme today. That men searching for some sort of reason or some sort of, I guess, without a better word, path, some sort of path. I mean, it seems to be very, very prevalent today in almost all walks of life. Men feel disenfranchised with this world that they find themselves stuck in.
Well, there's a reason that superhero movies are so popular. You know, that's polytheism. That's the return of polytheism for all intents and purposes. I mean, what the hell are those things? They're demigods. Right. Obviously, one of them's Thor, for God's sake. I mean, how more obvious could it be?
Right.
You know, and so you might say, well, who's the leader of the demigods? Because that's the person you really want to follow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the evolutionary answer to that is, as far as the Christian route went, was Christ. But there's been lots of embodiments of that. For the Mesopotamians, it was Marduk. Marduk was the savior figure. He had eyes all the way around his head, and he spoke magic words. That was his fun. That's what made him different from all the other gods. And he was elected by all the other gods to be their king. And then he went out and fought Tiamat, who's a great dragon, and made the world out of her pieces. One of his names was he who makes ingenious things out of the combat with Tiamat. Well, that's what human beings do, is they go out into the unknown, into chaos, and they make ingenious things out of it. That's what we do. And so Marduk was the founder of Mesopotamian civilization. And you could think about all those tribes came together to make Mesopotamia. They all had a god. And so then those gods went to war. And out of that war of gods, a meta-god emerged. That was Marduk. And Marduk is one of the sources for the figure of Christ. That happened all over the place. Like, you see the admirable man, then you see 10 admirable men, and you think, wow, those guys have something in common. That's what you remember about them, you see? You remember the heroic things they've done because they stick in your memory, because they fit the pattern. And then you start telling the story about the heroic things that a bunch of them did. It all amalgamates together. And then you come out with your culture hero, your god. Then there's like 50 tribes. They each have their own gods. Well, what are you going to do then? The gods go to war over centuries. And then they elect a new god, Marduk, in the case of the Mesopotamians. And he's the thing that goes out and fights the dragon of chaos and makes the world. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what he is. You do that with truth, because truth introduces you to chaos.
Why do you think, though, it's so much of an issue with males as opposed to females in our society?
Maybe females already have enough to do. Like, really. Like maybe men have to take this on voluntarily. That's what it looks like to me. Because like you can screw around till you're 50. You can still have a family. You got time. And you can sit down and do nothing if you want. You can do it. So, but you shouldn't, because it's horrible to do that. And people who do it know it. Like it's meaningless. It's a funny thing about meaninglessness. There's no such thing. When people say their lives are meaningless, that isn't what they mean. They mean I'm in pain and anxious all the time. That's what they mean. Those are meanings, man. You don't get neutral. You know, I'm just sitting around, I'm not feeling anything. It's like, no,
right, no one gets
sorry, that doesn't happen.
Right. So when you say do nothing, that your life is meaningless if you're doing nothing. What do you mean by doing nothing?
Well, by not accepting any responsibility, by not lifting a great load, by not acting out the archetype of the hero. That's what people are. That's what men are. If they're anything. They're mythological heroes, if they're anything.
Through some path, whatever it be.
There's lots of paths. I mean, so look, there's an old medieval idea. This is the idea of the imitation of Christ. This is something that Jung elaborates on a lot. He believed, this is one of the things that he said, was that the proper goal of a Christian, roughly speaking, is to enact the meta pattern of Christ's life in their own, to make it their own story. And so what did he mean by that? Well, part of it is, see, one of the things that characterizes the mythological figure of Christ, let's say, is that he takes on the burden of mortality voluntarily. He accepts it as a precondition of existence. And we have to do that because otherwise we get resentful. Like, life is hard, make no mistake about it. People's lives are tragic. You know, if you pick a random person off the street and you ask them about their life, man, usually there's things that have happened there. You know, they just beggar the imagination. It's no wonder people are angry and resentful and bitter. But the way out of that is to accept it. to accept your mortality, and that helps you transcend it. That's partly what the crucifix symbol means, because it was accepted voluntarily. You have to accept your death voluntarily. That's part of the path of the hero. It's a very difficult thing to do, obviously. What's your alternative?
Yeah, obviously. I think people are constantly searching for that thing that you just described, the thing of meaning, having meaning in this life. And that meaning has a different definition for everybody. I mean, everybody's meaning is different. I mean, your meaning might be very different than mine or Jamie's. I mean, you kind of have to have your own path. And I think that's also one of the reasons why people are so confused, is because you're thrust into an early age into a very rigid system of education, and then of jobs, and then of career structure, where you're in this place, and most people don't feel like that's what they're supposed to be doing. And we feel very alienated by the very structure of society that we are embedded in.
Of course. Well, one of the, there's two primary masculine mythological figures, and one is the wise king, and the other is the king who devours his own son. Right? That's the patriarchy that the feminists are always talking about. Well, of course, it's always there. So society is a destructive force. It doesn't care about you as an individual. It needs you to be part of society. It needs you to adopt the norms and to squelch your peculiar individuality, and to be a cog, and to be socialized, and, to hem yourself in and control yourself and not be impulsive. And yeah, it's a tyrant. But the thing is, society isn't only a tyrant. That's the thing. It's like, how about a little gratitude in there? Well, people have a hard time with this because we like it when a thing is only one thing. But society is always two things. It's the thing that alienates you, and the thing that's your benevolent father. Always. Now, sometimes it tilts harder towards the tyrant, and that's not so good. But that's an archetypal reality. So, what do you have to contend with in life? This is why these are archetypal realities, because everyone has to contend with them. You have to contend with yourself and the adversary that's inside you that seems to oppose your every movement. The fact that that you just can't move forward smoothly through life without being in conflict with yourself. So there's the hero and the adversary on the individual level. And then on the social level, there's the wise king and the tyrant. You're always going to run into that. I don't care if you're a Bantu tribesman or a New York lawyer. All those things you're going to run into. And then in the natural world, you're going to run into the destructive element of nature, right? That's the Gorgon. You let that thing get a glance at you, and you're one like frozen puppy. But also there's the benevolent element of nature. That's feminine. That's Mother Nature. Both of those extremes. So, and that's the world. That's the archetypal world. And it's because it's eternal as far as human beings are concerned. Those things are always there. That's our true environment. It's not these things we see around us. They're lasting no time. These other things last forever. And that's what we're adapted to. We're adapted to the things that last forever. So,
but yet we go through this finite life searching for meaning.
Well, and it's funny to note where meaning seems to locate itself. You want a meaning that justifies the suffering. It's something like that. That's a transcendent meaning. It's like, this is hard, but it's worth it. Okay, so what do? Pick something worth it, right? That's partly what I try to get people to do with that future authoring program. So say, okay, look, here's a place to start. You got your miserable self right now. It's like 3 to 5 years out. Imagine what your life could be like if you had what you would give yourself if you were taking care of yourself. What would life be like? Just come up with an idea even about that. And so then people do that. And then they write out a plan to attain it. And then the college kids are like 30% more likely to stay in university if they do that, especially if they're men. Because men need a purpose. I think women have a purpose. Now they have two purposes. They're going to have a family. That's a major purpose, man. Like just to give birth. That's no joke. And then you're devoted to something for like 20 years. You got your adventure right there.
Yeah, but a lot of women find great offense in someone saying that, especially a man saying that, mansplaining that a woman's purpose is to breed, right? I mean, isn't that a giant issue that a lot of women have?
Well, I didn't say that was the only purpose.
I know that you didn't.
Oh, yeah, people have an issue with it, but it's like, grow up. If you're a sophisticated person, as far as I'm concerned, How many important things are there in life? Well, one of them's family. Like, it's as simple as that. Now, you might say, well, family isn't the end-all solution. It's like, yeah, well, thanks for pointing that out, you know. I've dealt with plenty of pathological families. But it's a huge part of life. You have a mother and a father, you have children, it places you in the world. And any society that, look, there's a reason societies worship the Virgin Mother and the child. It's because societies that don't die. And so people say, well, you know, that relationship between mother and child isn't the only thing. Okay, fine. It's still a sacred thing. And you miss it. You miss it. If you're female, you miss that at your peril. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't women who shouldn't miss it, because maybe they have another purpose that transcends that. But that's rare. It's very, very rare. And I would caution any women listening, if they're young, not to be deluded into the idea that their career will be of such high quality that it self-evidently trumps having a family. You have to have a hell of a career before that's the case. So